Happy Friday. I'm always pumped on my own videos and whatnot, but it's not about me today. Welcome to War Hero to Superhero, helping military veterans and first responders transform their lives from the bedroom to the boardroom. We have been in a theme this week about the heat because across the nation, it's beating us up 116 in Washington State. Whew, it's only like 70 over here. That's why I can wear a sweater. Life has turned up the heat also for some people in lives. And sometimes when it's outside heat, it's AC and finding shade, but life doesn't provide that. You don't get the air conditioner for it. You don't just be like, hey, my life is hard. Doesn't happen. So what are we going to do? And that's why these last 2 weeks, today's the last day that we've been focusing on different people that have been sweltering through the heat, getting exhausted through the heat, gone through the heat waves, and now have broken free to go over and to bring their message across to help you break away from those heat waves. So our next guest is a man of strength and diligence, Jax Young, that went over and transformed his life from veteran to almost homeless, now to going over and helping people in the entertainment industry. And we're going to bring him forward to share his stories on how he transformed and what he can equip us with. So when those heat waves come, we get relief. So I'm going to bring him in and bring him forward. Hey, Jax, thanks for joining.
Hey, what's going on, Daniel? How's everything over there?
For temperature wise, it's fantastic, but hopefully for our story wise, it's really transformative that you got. So again, we talked about you had a military and a civilian transition, even you've done jobs in the corporate world and entertainment world and everything else. We want you to share a story. So what keeps you going when it feels like it doesn't end? Because when it's sweltering heat, you just want to give up, but you didn't go over and do that. So we'd love for you to share that story. And how did you survive through that ordeal?
First and foremost, I love this subject matter. And one of the biggest reasons that I love this subject matter is because it's a great way to create an awesome metaphor, in my opinion, when you're talking about the heat. Because heat can keep you warm or heat can burn you up, right? Heat can create forward momentum or it can completely disintegrate you. And so in my life, I've experienced a tremendous amount of heat, for lack of a better phrase, on the positive side and the negative side. I would say one of the first things when you're having to deal with any kind of situation is to look at what that situation is. And I know that that seems like remedial, but a lot of people don't do it, right? They get so caught up in what's the end result or what's happened in the past instead of just maintaining that presence and just really looking at what that situation is, because any kind of pressure, any kind of heat, any kind of struggle can actually be a tool that will benefit you if you allow it that opportunity. So the first thing to me is just really identifying what that situation is.
And that's really awesome. But what did you do to go over and to survive that heat? Because knowing it, being present in it, but then what did you take to go forward just to survive in that particular realm?
Well, the survival aspects of things is very interesting because you have to really, again, stay present. So the first step of survival is staying present in the moment. For a long time, I was a people pleaser and I didn't realize that I was a people pleaser. And for a long time, avoidance was my drug. And I didn't realize that avoidance was my drug because I was that stoic guy. When I was in the Army, I was in the infantry. And so everything's about readiness. Everything's about mission. I'm good to go no matter what, die first, ask questions later sort of thing. And a lot of that bravado is BS, in my opinion. It's not about die and ask questions later. It's truly about like really understanding the situation that you're in. So that's the first step to survival. The next step to survival, once you sort of understand the situation that you're in, is what are the steps that you want to take to be able to get through that situation in a positive way, right? We've got two choices. One, we can be reactive or we can be proactive. Reactive says whatever comes our way, we're going to immediately respond to it. Proactive says, okay, what am I getting out of this step by step as I'm continuing to navigate, this survival situation? I like to use one of the biggest things that I went through in my life is suicide. Now, with that being said, I don't believe that there's a such thing as suicide prevention. I believe that suicide is the end of the line. If you're at the point where suicide is where you want to go, then it's already too late, right? So I had to go through that process, survive that process in order to really understand the other side of it. And so what happened to me is I went to hang myself with a belt, and whatever I was using as a way to leverage my weight couldn't hold the distribution once it went to dead body weight. And thank God that it did, because it broke and my brain asphyxiated, but I didn't die, right? So I always like to joke around, or I used to joke around, like I'm a perfectionist and I'm glad I didn't accomplish it that day. But but anyways, taking off the belt around my neck, because now we're talking about survival, right? Taking the belt off of my neck, I thought, oh, I'm dead. I'm a ghost, right? So I walked over, I opened the door. I was like, I guess ghosts can open doors. Then I walked over to the steps and I said, I'm going to have some fun with this, and I'm going to step off. And when I stepped off, I realized almost immediately that I wasn't dead, but in the next few seconds, I could be dead, right? And so I immediately clung to life. God, please let me live. Please let me live. And then boom, I hit the ground. I felt all that pain rush through my whole body, but I was alive. Okay. So what do you take from that situation in the survival aspects of things, right? Because survival says, what are the basic things that I need in order to get from point A to point B, right? The bare minimum. That's what survival is. And so what I took from that situation is I learned how to disassemble suicide. The first thing that I learned to disassemble with suicide was that it's not my life to take, right? As a primary instinct, as animals, we have a flight or fight mechanism, right? You don't see a squirrel outside being like, oh, I can't take it anymore, and, jumping off the branch, to their death or whatever. So on a very primary level, we're animals. So that was the first thing that I understood. Why? Because when it was my choice to take my life, right, I was in a situation where it was like, felt like it was a good idea. But when my life could actually be taken from me, right, if I really wanted to die, then I would have just free falled, right? Because I had no choice in the matter and I could die. My neck could break from falling down those steps, but I didn't. So that was the first thing that I disassembled suicide. The second thing is when I started telling the story to people, because the other part of that survival was being transparent with myself of that situation and who I was as a person. And I needed other people to definitely see me as that person in order to be able to move past that survival piece, because there is a next piece after survival. And so what I saw is everybody's face that I looked at, they had this look of like, oh my God, I didn't know. What could I do differently? All that thing. So they took that responsibility in when they had no responsibility. When I went to take my life, it wasn't one of those things where I'd been thinking about it. I didn't have a plan. It was instinct. It was reaction. And so the second part that I learned to understand in the survival aspects of it, in disassembling suicide, was you ultimately create a hole in every single person that once you're gone from here. So the mindset of me to commit suicide was, oh, I'm not relevant in anyone's life. I'll kill myself. Everybody's life will get better. I won't be a burden to anyone anymore. And that was a major fallacy. And so when it comes down to those survival instincts, where the heat was on me was not the fact that I made the act of committing suicide. Where the heat was on me was, what was I going to do next? How was I going to be able to shape, my livelihood and my lessons moving forward, of where I would be able to have the survival tools to move on past survival, which that next step is prosperity. So that was one instance where, surviving the heat in that way was huge in a negative way that turned into a positive.
Yeah, that's really transformative in that regard. I've never heard, and I worked in suicide with suicide prevention and mental health and everything else when I was active duty. And that's profound in that particular regard because I know I choked today, like on food. It's not like I was trying to tie the episode, but I'm just thinking about all the stuff you're talking about. You know, the body, even though I couldn't get the thing dislodged, my throat did the work to get it out. And then after that, I was fine. So you're right. It's like the innate, like, hey, you're not, if you wanted to give up or you really had that choice, even your body wouldn't have gone over and did it. You would have been like, hey, I have an active choice. No, I'm just going to keep it dislodged and I'm going to cut off my oxygen. So that's very profound. Like when we think we have choice, we really don't. Like when we get hurt or if life is going to come in there, we kind of sort of save ourselves, even if it's like, hey, asking for help in that particular regard. So that's very interesting.
And you've got to be very on purpose with looking at what that next step is like. Like I can't stress that enough because it's a very sensitive subject for people that know you and care about you. We need more anxiety education in this country than continuing to say that there's a such thing as suicide prevention. Because if you look at the statistics in the research that I've done, every person that I've read a story about, I regret pulling the trigger. I regret kicking the chair out. I regret jumping off the bridge. So that tells you that the focus that you have is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So literally, if you can start to understand anxiety and what anxiety does to you, and I've learned this for over 60 counseling sessions now with the VA, is that one breath can make the difference. And then if that one breath doesn't work, then that next breath, but not reacting. Being proactive is probably one of the biggest tools in any situation that can help you to be able to endure, the heat, so to speak, since that's the subject matter.
No, I agree. That's really huge. And what active changes did you make after that to start thriving? So you started looking at the mindset and being proactive. Like what proactive steps did it go to now be thriving now with the nonprofit that you're running and everything else? So what steps did you make those changes?
Sure. And I think that this is a great word. I love thrive because thrive says that you don't have an end result. Thrive says that you're going to have the confidence to move forward, right? It doesn't matter necessarily what the steps are to get there. That's just going to be the juice in the tank to keep driving you forward. And I love that you chose that word. I would say that the thriving component from that was the ability to know myself, right? The ability to say to myself, you spent all of this time not knowing who you were, and that's how you ended up in the situation that you're in. So what is the way to be able to excel through that? And that's really taking the time to get to know yourself. And that's where counseling really helps you to start to take that next step and that next level. I went from being like, the good to go stoic cowboy, mysterious guy, all the alpha maleisms that you can imagine, to being like, you're full of shit. You're not full of shit in the sense of like the things that and how you present yourself, because it's only one facet. You're full of shit because you're not giving yourself the benefit of the doubt to know yourself more, right? To really excel in that vulnerability and to excel in that transparency about who you are as a person. And that was really turning the tide for me in a lot of ways in creating those fundamental elements to thrive. Now, when it came to switching gears a little bit into business, one of the pitfalls that we made initially was calling ourselves Save XXII or Save 22. Because every conversation that we had with people, and this is about the heat again, right? Every conversation we have, someone would want to say, oh yeah, veterans, 22 a day committing suicide and all this sort of thing. But when you look at the statistical research, there's someone committing suicide every 16 seconds in this country. Veterans don't own the real estate on that, right?
Mhm.
It's great that the visibility has been brought forth, but it's a silent epidemic. And the biggest reason why is because of the way that the narrative is shaped, right? The way the narrative is shaped is that, oh, I could have prevented him from being able to do this. Did you know that when people commit suicide, 1 in 6 people close to them automatically, because of the way that everything is shaped and people talk about and what you see in the current narrative in the media and everything else, they could possibly become suicidal. Now
Mm.
that's an epidemic, right? If someone, I mean, do the math on that. Every 16 seconds, someone killing themselves, 1 in 6 of that every 16 seconds could make the choice to commit suicide if they commit suicide, and so forth and so on, right?
Yeah.
So how do you thrive through that situation? Well, one of the biggest things that we had to do was change the name, because
Mm.
that wasn't our focus. Our focus wasn't suicide. We
Mm.
wanted to be proactive, not reactive. And so we changed our DBA to Save Homefront, right? That eventually became SHF. But the
Mm.
thriving piece of that is being honest with yourself when you know something isn't working. And this can be universal, right? It's not
Mm.
just for branding, but it's important in branding that you understand this, especially in the kind of work that I do,
Mm.
that messaging system is got to be, dress right dress. And you can't just keep pushing something on somebody thinking that they're going to get it, and misrepresenting yourself. You've got to take that step back, and you've got to say to yourself, okay, we want to do this, but it's not working. So how do we pivot and be able to step to that next place? So to thrive, you have to put your ego in check, right? You can't be so buried to something that you're missing the point of where you can find your success. So that's
Wow.
how you thrive.
That's really huge. That ties in multiple different places, and just the wisdom that you're sharing. I mean, thinking about myself on things I went over and did, and when you take yourself out of it and what it's reflecting to the other people, it's going over and rewriting the script so then you can go over and captivate the right people to break that narrative. Because every 16 seconds, I was trying to do the math. It's like one every about 3.8, 3.8 to every minute, and there's 86,400 seconds. I'll have to get the math later, but that's an astronomical number. That's roughly about 20, 22, 23. Yeah, it's about 22,000, I think. I'd have to do the numbers again, but yeah, that's a day. That's just in a day. So that's
Right.
a mind blow in itself. So you can't just keep focusing like, hey, I own real estate in this. I need to get the message out to go over and to rewrite the narrative. So that sounds very much wise to go over and look at that from many perspectives. So what major lessons did you learn in that season that you're applying today, each and every day? We talked about the proactive side and that particular thing, and about rewriting the narrative and how you do in branding. But if we had to culminate into one major lesson, what was that one major lesson that you learned that season that you apply every day?
So I never heard the phrase reasons and seasons.
Mm.
And once I kind of understood what that was, what I realized is that everybody has problems. It's just a matter of how you can functionally handle your problems or dysfunctionally handle your problems.
Mm.
And why I think that was the most vital thing to learn in that season was because I was very much in the mentality of continuously wanting to be a perfectionist instead of celebrating my imperfections,
Mm.
right? We learn more from failure than we do success. And then we don't even take the time to relish in our success before we're moving on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So when you're constantly in that revolving situation, it breeds anxiety. It
Hmm.
breeds mistrust. It breeds lack of self-worth and all those different kinds of things. And so that is what I would say that really was the game changer for me in that season in my life, is that for the first time in my life, I started realizing that it was okay to be able to have problems, and that you needed to learn how, right? And that's where the prosperity came from, which I don't know if
Mm.
that's one of the things that you'll ask or not, but
Mm.
that's where the prosperity came from, was because once I could center myself, right? Once I could control myself in the heat, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the thing that you need to think about too, which is a little bit off of the season, but I think is important to mention is
Yeah.
you have only control over yourself. So no matter how hot it gets, if
Mm-hmm.
you have to be able to sit in that, then that's when your mind over matter starts to take over, right? Now, with that being said, if the heat gets to be too much, that's where you have to be respectful to yourself too and say, okay, I've got a problem. I can't get past this anymore at this level of where I'm at. So I'm going to have to bow out. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it is okay to quit. It's okay to say I can't take anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And once you understand that that is being honest with yourself and your problems,
Yeah.
it puts you in a whole different perspective of a way of thinking.
Yeah, I really think it also empowers others. So if I'm struggling in a certain area and I say, hey, the heat is too much for me, those people can come in and take me out of the heat, refresh me, and maybe come fill in those barriers. And maybe I put myself in there too quickly. Like I can run outside in 130 degrees because I lived in Arizona for a long time and I'm hoping to go back
Mm-hmm.
ASAP. But I knew people that were like in Washington when even when it got to 75 degrees, they couldn't handle it. And it's just being honest with themselves. It's like, hey, I run in the cold. That's great. That's when you're thriving. And I run in the heat. But it's the same thing in life. I might run great in this heat wave, but another heat wave, I'm not. And then that allows those people to empower your life. So then you can then be, and that whole presence thing that you were talking about, that's like huge. I mean, we really do that. We'll get like a great hype. Like, let's say, this got like a lot of views. Like I had one like months ago, I got a lot of views and I don't get a lot of views like recently. And then you go over and like, you beat yourself up because it's like, and you get in that perpetuation. So your whole thing tying together, it's huge. We need to be more present. We need to be enjoying the moments. We need to learn to be retrospective and take the heat and what lessons we're learning. And we just need to be thankful for now because the later is going to eventually come, but then it's going to be the now. And we could go and we don't, and then we have to be thankful for also the things that were positive then. So yeah, you just really tied it really, really well. And I'd love to expand on that on how did you equip yourself for those future endeavors? Because I'm thinking about it now on how I would do it. But from your perspective, like you're in present now, but when that next heat wave comes, what do you take to equip yourself for the next one?
So I'd like to touch on something that you said that I think definitely incorporates with this question, and the part that you mentioned where people can take you out of the heat,
Mhm.
right? Or you can make those adjustments with the community of people around you. I think one of the biggest things that I learned to help you equip for anything is that we are meant to be social creatures, right?
Mhm.
The military and national media and Hollywood and things of that nature, like they take men like you and I and they personify this lone wolf that I don't need anybody, that I don't need any relationship. I can
Mhm.
take my bare tools and conquer the world. And that's bullshit. Like it's BS. It's 100% BS because we are meant to be a tribe of people. And so if you say to yourself, or you say to me, Jax, well, if there's no such thing as suicide prevention, then what is the answer? Because obviously there has to be something of how, the connections are made to be able to help people in that respect. And it's anxiety education. When you said someone can take you out of the heat, the way you can equip yourself is saying to somebody, hey, I want you to know that I deal with anxiety. So if I get hyperverbal or there's a situation where it seems like, I'm talking negative or whatever that example is for you,
Mhm.
then you can then educate your tribe and the people around you. And that's how you can become successful full circle, right? It's not
Mhm.
about the future. I don't believe in the future, right?
Mhm.
Because I believe that it's the steps that you take one by one that get you to your goal. But we have this arrogance of believing that because I arrived and because it was the prediction that I wanted to make, that I'm there. So when we have our failures, it hits us that much harder because we're like, oh, I didn't see that coming or anything like that. Plus, I
Mm.
can tell you the other piece of being a people pleaser, and this isn't examples, this is my life that we're talking about directly now,
Yeah.
is the fact that I've been fortunate to do amazing things in my life. I mean, I'm not gonna like brag or whatever, but it's been an awesome ride up into this point.
Mm.
And there's so much that I missed because I was so focused on whatever the defense mechanism was that was telling me to do, that I didn't have any value for myself. I still don't. I'm
Mm.
learning just the basics to kind of understand that. And that has to do with things in my childhood, that has to do with things in the military. So your past is an influence, but it is definitely not the reason for the attitude of your present. Do you
Mm.
understand that? Just
Yeah.
because, daddy, might have been bad to you when you were little, or you didn't get the girl that you wanted, or whatever else, you always have a responsibility in that heat, whether to communicate to your tribe to say,
Mm.
okay, how do we work together to be successful? Or to be honest with yourself about what you can endure. And as you continue to endure, what kind of attitude you're going to present. So that is the best way that you can equip yourself, is get anxiety education. Whether you think that you deal with it or not, the more anxiety education you have and the more you can be transparent with the people around you, the more you can control the temperature of that heat, because you're not going to be able to do it by yourself ever.
Yeah, and that's huge. That's formative instruction. That's understanding of oneself and going over and saying like, here's this and here's that. I mean, and most people don't understand. They react, they react, they react, and then situation altercation happens, and then they just react. You see that in divorces, you see that in businesses getting destroyed, you see that in family relationships go over and go. And then they think, oh, I'm not the person, it's the other person. And then they replace the other person or the other entity or the other environment, and then they go over and they like, even in the military, like, hey, sergeant so and so pissed me off, when I get to my next base it's going to be different, and then it's airman so and so, and you're like, ah. And we don't think it's like, it might be us and our reactions and our anxiety and just feeling it through, and we're going through the same thing and knowing, saying like, hey, this triggers me, that triggers me. Now people can, got your six, as some people say it, then they can back you up. And I think that's true. We need to break the bravado, break the arrogance, and go over and say, be humble and say, here's my strengths, here's my weaknesses, and take that reflective moment. So that's huge, is equipping yourself in there. And lastly, for our last question of the day, and this is very profound conversation. All my guests I have gone through, it's like, this has been to me. So what resources do you have in your tool belt that goes over and that allows you to help others?
The biggest resource that I have is as a disabled veteran, getting connected with counseling. I had over 60 hours of counseling, and now I'm back in again. I don't know how many I've had this time, but it
Mhm.
has had the most profound effect in my life. And here's the thing, that proactive versus reactive thing that we talked about, right? I definitely ended up the first round of counseling based off of a reactive situation, right?
Mhm.
Now, the second round of counseling that I've been in has been proactive. I
Mhm.
went in with wanting to have certain things in mind of what I wanted to accomplish. And as I was proactive in that process, more things were able to develop, right? Because you touched on something that I think is very important also, that's a tool in my tool belt, is you don't want to be the villain in your own story.
Mhm.
No one does, right? It's this innate thing about us as human beings, this higher evolutionary of thought that we're supposed to be with the animal kingdom, that we believe, that gravitation away from rejection. So therefore you become inadvertently the hero in your own story. And the reality is, when you can learn to be honest with yourself of what your villainy is in
Mhm.
your own story, and it is villainous, whether it's complacency, whether it's anger, whatever, whenever you're not doing something to be proactive for yourself, you're showing yourself disrespect. And
Mhm.
so once you can identify and be honest about that part of it continuously, right? It's not just a one-time thing. It's
Mhm.
a continuous staying present aspect of what your villainy is in the situation, then that's an extraordinary tool in your tool belt. And also being proactive into getting into counseling before it's already an issue, right? Everybody, in my opinion, could
Mhm.
utilize some form of counseling, and I used to think it was a bunch of BS. Like I was that guy, like straight up. I remember I'd go in the first round through, and I was homeless at the time, and I wouldn't say anything, and I'd have to sit in there for 45 minutes, you know and now it's like it works. Listen to me when I tell you 150% that it works, and what these people are there to help you with is real as it can get. And you don't know yourself, and you don't know what you're talking about. So those are two of the most profound tools in your tool belt that will help you to take on any situation, within merit. And I think the last thing is don't be afraid of constructive criticism, whether
Mhm.
that's in business or in your personal life. Connect with people and have conversations and get that feedback, because you don't see you how other people see you.
No, that's huge in that particular regard. And for the veterans and military people who are watching, I used to work in mental health, and just so you know, 97% of people don't get kicked out of the military going there. That's number one. Number two, you don't have to have a diagnosis to even go. We have military family life consultants that can go help you through that transition. And number three, if you don't know those resources, love to connect with you to get connected with those resources. But that's true. It's like when you start jumping in and asking for that help, it's helping you to be a better husband and a better wife, better being a better father and a better mother and a better business person to your team as you go over and grow, because your relationships will affect from bedroom to boardroom. And you basically took my whole entire show and my culmination I've been doing for the past 2 years, and you just take it and summarize it in one interview. That was fantastic. So Jax, I want to thank you for going over and joining us. I'd like to give you some time to uplift your brand, because we always want to uplift the brands that veterans are going to do. So if you can give a couple minutes on what you're doing right lately, what is your nonprofit about, and how you're helping our community.
Sure. Our biggest focus is creating an authentic depiction of U.S. veterans. For a long time, we've been mischaracterized in the media, and we've been mischaracterized in Hollywood and all that other kind of thing. And so that is our purpose. We utilize professional entertainment projects with community neighbors, non-veterans. That's what we call non-veterans, excuse me, and veterans, in order to create these relationships and show that these relationships work, because they're important. As you can see, there's a shirt right here that says "This shirt makes history." You can find out more about that at shfveterans.org. Because I don't want to convolute it a lot with my branding stuff, because of the profound stuff that we've been on this subject matter today.
Mm.
A major help for us is if you are connected in some way to a U.S. veteran that's done something extraordinary in life after the uniform, either in entrepreneurship or entertainment. We want to talk to you, or we want to talk to them. So help us to create that connection. And the other piece is by simply going to @SaveHomefront for our Instagram or our social media on Facebook, and just giving us a like to that page is huge, because our whole purpose is continuing to put eyes and ears of authentic depiction. These great stories about people that go on to do extraordinary things in life after the uniform, not the harrowing things that we already know about, but more so the identity relationship that we can create for the people that say, I don't know how to relate to a veteran. No, you may not be able to relate to a combat veteran, or someone that is like an amputee, or hearing words like post-traumatic stress or those kinds of things. But you do relate to veterans every day, because there's been extraordinary veterans over the course of the last 100 years that we've had veterans on this planet that have helped to build America. And that is the lane that we're in. We're there as the public relations component for the broad strokes, to get people engaged that otherwise wouldn't want to be engaged. And also to hold veterans accountable in the sense to say, yes, you may have done extraordinary things in the uniform, but those are only the building blocks for the next chapter of your life. So how do we want to write that, right? How do we want to write that chapter? And we do it all through an entertaining and an engaging way. I mean, that's how you and I met. You know, you saw a project on our Facebook page, and that kind of garnered some interest, and then, you know, we continued to develop from there. So my point is that this actually works. This organic way of people identifying for themselves of where they want to go, instead of continuously thrusting your opinion down somebody's throat, is a much more proactive approach to get people involved. We got to stop calling people snowflakes, man. We got to stop creating this whole rejection of people that don't fit the mold. And this goes for our community, that don't particularly fit the mold that you may think is the mold that needs to be fit, you know?
And that's truly awesome. And I want to thank you for joining the show, and the people going on watching. In every episode of War Hero Superhero, when we interview people, we give them an opportunity to uplift their brand to our television show. So on Facebook, this little device over here, you might be watching right now and you might be doing the auto caption thing. You might be just watching it silently, but we count views to go over and to uplift to our next show in that particular regard. So 3 seconds clicking on the video goes over and opens up the video and gives Jax a view. If Jax gets the most view in 5 days out of the people in the last 2 weeks, and we count that through the algorithm, then he gets an opportunity to uplift his brand and also be on the TV show. The special thing we're doing with Escape the Heat is if Jax can get 5,000 views in 5 days, then we will take one of his commercials and air it through all our social media and our television show for 30 days. So we don't advertise it after this, Jax. So it's your choice to go over and to push the message, just to go over and get the bigger message of rewriting the script for our veterans and to getting the message out there. So it's the ball's in your court. And I wanted to give you another minute or so for like closing remarks, and then we're going to close out.
Well, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I want to say, Daniel, is I appreciate the opportunity. I love the fact of the way that you comprehensively put your interview together, and I will make sure that, you know, people that I talk to, that they do connect with you, because it's a very refreshing approach. It's very to the point as far as what you want to accomplish, and I think that's fantastic. As far as to the people that are listening out there, listen, this U.S. veteran is doing the best that he can to continue to promote an authentic depiction for U.S. veterans. So please tune in to this show, and we look forward to working with you at shfveterans.org and hearing from you at Save Homefront on our social media. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We really appreciate it.
And I want to thank all the people watching War Hero Superhero. You have a great 4th of July. Relax, recharge, refresh, celebrate the reason why, and go over and come back next week to go over and just recharge back in the marriage room to help you thrive in the marriage room. So thank you.